Welcome back to a Book a Day podcast. And the book that I've got with me today, it's called The Art of Loving, written by Erich Fromm, who was a philosopher and psychoanalyst. It was published in 1956. Quite an old book that way. But still, I would say one of the finest reads on the subject of love. And there's plenty to learn from it. And as the title suggests, it starts with the art of love. And the question that we must ask ourselves, first of all, is love an art? It sounds easy, but there's a lot of confusion out there because there are really two schools of thought when it comes to the subject of love. One is the more romantic view, which says that love is a pleasant sensation, and it's a matter of chance, and you fall in love. It's something that happens to you. And then the other school of thought, which says love is really an art. It requires knowledge and effort and skill. So that's the other one. And Erich Fromm in this book, The Art of Loving, goes by the second premise, that is, it's an art. What about the first school? What do those people say? I think those people are in majority. Most of the people, they see the problem of love primarily as problem of being loved rather than that of loving. So the problem to them is how to be loved, how to be lovable. And in that pursuit, as Erich Fromm tells us in his book, people follow several paths. That's really the fundamental psychology behind we are doing different things. One, he says, which is especially used by men, one strategy is to be more successful, to be as powerful or as rich as the social margins of one's position permits. And another one, which is more commonly used by, at least traditionally used by women, but these days also by men, is to make oneself attractive and by working on one's body, dress, etc. So, once again, the focus is to make yourself lovable. And that's really been the idea of love in the popular culture. It is essentially a mixture between being popular and having sex appeal. That's all it is. But the more interesting idea and something that I find of great value is the second one, where the assumption is that the problem of love is not just the problem of object, but the problem of a faculty. And in this sense, as the cliched quote goes, love is not a noun, it's a verb. It's how you do it. Instead of the previous idea, which uh, focuses on the consuming qualities of love, this approach is all about giving love. And this approach, although very interesting, it requires a lot of effort. The romantic approach is something, as the word suggests, it's romantic. It suggests that love is really easy. It doesn't require any effort. You just fall in love. It just happens to you. But Erich Fromm's approach is much more than that. It's about working hard on it, consistently work on it, and becoming better at it. So, the first step in this case is to become aware that love is an art, just like living is an art. And if we really want to learn this art, become better at it, in that case, we'll have to proceed in the same way as we proceed in any other case of art, say music or painting, or acquiring any other skill, say medicine or engineering. So, what are the necessary steps when it comes to learning any art? And then we can talk about this particular form. Well, there are just two. One, the mastery of the theory, and second, the mastery of the practice. So clearly, we have to first understand this, the art of loving, and then we can subsequently practice it. So, what about the theory part? This is where Erich Fromm's book really helps. Tells us about this theory, at least his theory, how he sees it, and he gives valid reasons for it. To explain this theory, he talks about human existence first. He says that man is gifted with reason. He is life being aware of itself. That is, he has awareness of himself, of his fellow men, of his past, and of the possibilities of future. So this kind of awareness of himself creates a separate identity. This awareness of his own short lifespan, his own identity. This kind of identity creates separateness. And this experience of separateness, it causes anxiety. And Fromm says it is this particular feeling, this idea of separateness, this that comes from the individual identity. It is the source of all anxiety. Because being separate means being cut out without any capacity to use your human powers. So, in other words, to be separate means to be helpless, unable to grasp the world, whether things or people. And then Fromm says something very interesting. Let me quote. He says, the awareness of human separation without reunion by love is the source of shame. It is at the same time the source of guilt and anxiety. So there arises the deepest need of human beings. That is the need to overcome this separateness, this idea of being in the prison of one's own aloneness. And how does he answer this question? Well, Fromm says the answer varies. The question can be answered by animal worship, by human sacrifice, military conquest, indulgence in luxury, by ascetic renunciation, by obsessional work, by artistic creation, by the love of God, and by the love of humans. And if you think about it, that's really been the human history. That's been the history of religion and philosophy all over the world. And that's how, in the name of religion or ideas, people have come together and formed groups, formed communities. And he greatly stresses on this idea of conformity. He says that human beings have this deep tendency to conform to each other and go with each other and just come together. That's where this feeling of love, that's where it arises. And I loved how broadly he defines love. He says, love is an active power in man, a power which breaks through the walls which separate man from his fellow men, which unites him with others. Love makes him overcome the sense of isolation and separateness, and yet it permits him to be himself, to retain his integrity. In love, the paradox occurs. The two beings become one and yet remain two. And that's a beautiful description, I think, and that is how it should be, two beings becoming one and yet preserving their identities. Because if you completely lose your identity, then uh, sometimes problems might occur. But if you are being yourself, the other person is being themselves, then the union is really beautiful. Now let's talk more about love as an active thing, as an activity rather than a passive effect. As we discussed earlier, that Fromm doesn't agree with this classical romantic notion that love is about just experiencing something. It happens to you, you fall in love. He says you don't fall in it, but you have to stand in it. It's an active process. It's about giving, as I said. So, what is giving? It's not as simple as it actually sounds, it's much more complex than that. Once again, let me quote him when he talks about giving. He says, "In the very act of giving, I experience my strength, my wealth, my power. This experience of heightened vitality and potency fills me with joy. I experience myself as overflowing, spending, alive, hence as joyous. Giving is more joyous than receiving, not because it is a deprivation, but because in the act of giving lies the expression of my aliveness." So that's really the idea that differentiates it from the modern culture where love has become a commodity and it's all about consuming it. And he says that act of consuming, act of consumption, it doesn't make you feel alive, but when you're giving, it makes you really feel alive. And it's so true, I think. And then he talks about how physically we give ourselves, how in material terms we give different things, gifts to each other to express our love. But the most important realm of giving, he says, is in the specifically in the human realm. So what does one person give to another? Once again, let me quote him. He says he gives of himself, of the most precious he has. He gives of his life. So this does not necessarily mean that he sacrifices his life for the other. The point here is that the person gives himself or herself of that which is alive in them. So they give the lover his joy, the interest of the understanding, of the knowledge, of their humor, of their sadness, of all expressions and manifestations of that which are alive in that person. So, that way, in giving of one's life, one kind of enriches the other person, enhances the other person's sense of life, sense of aliveness, by enhancing one's own sense of aliveness. So one does not give in order to receive. Giving in itself is a joyful experience. And it's a mutual thing. It's not just one person is constantly giving and the other is receiving. Both are giving. And that's really the highest expression of love. Then the author also tells us that there are certain basic elements common to all forms of love. And these are care, responsibility, respect, and knowledge. Let me repeat again: care, responsibility, respect, and knowledge. The first three are pretty straightforward, but the fourth one, knowledge, is quite an interesting one. It means to know the other person, trying to know the other person, trying to understand them. And it is something that really goes deeper, because when you try to understand somebody, when you are trying to um, know them at a deeper level, that's where you really connect with them. And that's where this earlier idea that we discussed of separateness, that really closes. The union happens. It's not just about the physical part, it's this deep sense of belonging. It comes through emotions, it comes through understanding. And once again, you can extend this idea of knowing from personal relationships to the religious idea of knowing the God. That's that's really been the central thesis of a lot of religions. The theology has been based on this, that knowing God. How do you know God? How do you love God? And in certain religious practices or sects, you'll find this idea of union with the God. Once again, it's done through love. And I think no better way to describe it as the great mystic and poet Rumi said it. So let me end with Rumi's beautiful poem here, and it described this idea beautifully. He says, "Never, in sooth, does the lover seek without being sought by his beloved. When the lightning of love has shot into this heart, know that there is love in that heart. When the love of God waxes in thy heart, beyond any doubt, God has love for thee. No sound of clapping comes from one hand without the other hand. Divine wisdom is destiny, and decree made us lovers of one another. Because of that foreordainment, every part of the world is paired with its mate. In the view of the wise, heaven is man and earth woman. Earth fosters what heaven lets fall. When earth lacks heat, heaven sends it. When she has lost her freshness and moisture, heaven restores it. Heaven goes on his rounds like a husband foraging for the wife's sake. And earth is busy with housewiferys. She attends to birds and suckling that which she bears. Regard earth and heavens as endowed with intelligence, since they do the work of intelligent beings. Unless these twain taste pleasure from one another, why are they creeping together like sweethearts? Without the earth, how should flower and tree blossom? What then would heaven's water and heat produce? As God put desire in man and woman to the end that the world should be preserved by their union, so has He implanted in every part of existence the desire for another part. Day and night are enemies outwardly, yet both serve one purpose. Each in love with the other for the sake of perfecting their mutual work. Without night, the nature of man would receive no income. So there would be nothing for day to spend. And that's how it describes the idea of love. Love between the opposites. So with that, I'll take your leave, And I hope you'll get a chance to read the book because there's so much more to read in it. And then it really focuses on how the idea of love and how it has disintegrated in the modern culture, and how we can practice it despite the obstacles, how we can actively participate in it rather than becoming really consumers, and that leads us nowhere. That doesn't give us any kind of deeper sense of happiness. So I hope you'll get a chance to read the book, and I'm sure you'll have a good time. Thank you very much for listening. I'll catch you the next time with another book. Thank you very much.